I'm Wes McBee, and with me always the Holly Lee.
Yes.
And today we got a serial killer, standing 6'9", 300 pounds, IQ of 145, and a record of 10 murders. It's co-head killer himself, Ed Kemper.
Ed Kemper, as a lot of people know, the BFG, the Big Friendly Giant. I came up with a new acronym for him. It's the BFGTILSFM, Big Frightening Giant that I'd let skull fuck me. Or a new word I learned today, the BFGTILIM, Big Frightening Giant that what is it?
Rematio
me. I'd let Horatio me.
Oh no. Yeah, so there's your tasteless joke. Take it home with you and enjoy it.
Yeah, and also that is BFGTILSFM. Let's make it a thing.
M. Hashtag it.
Hashtag Big Ed, where you at?
Yeah, Big Ed. Big Ed, you look strong.
You look strong.
Jokes aside, Ed Kemper's pretty terrifying.
He is so scary. That's why he's Big Frightening Giant.
Big Frightening Giant. I mean, 6'9" is, that's barely getting into this door for this office.
Yeah, barely getting into the door. He can be in the, big leagues.
The big leagues.
Doing the hoops.
You'd be dunking from the half-court line.
Dunking from the half-court line in jail.
No, yeah, I mean, this episode's pretty interesting because, I mean, it's dark. He had a pretty fucked up childhood. He started murdering at a young age.
Yeah.
A fairly young age. Not as young as our Mary Bell.
Yeah.
One of our previous episodes, if you guys are interested in listening to that. But
the 11-year-old serial killer.
He was 15.
15. Yeah.
And he killed his grandparents, but
wild. Well, we'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that. As far as like his childhood though, I know that his parents were very abusive and his dad dipped fairly early, correct?
Yeah. It was more of his mom was really abusive and his dad tried his hardest, but was like, bitch, you crazy. But let's get into his childhood. So Ed Kemper was born December 18th, 1948. He was the middle child and the only born son to Clarendon Elizabeth Kemper and Edmund Emil Kemper the second. So that means Ed Kemper was the third. Which is crazy. And his dad was a World War II veteran. So kind of a badass guy. I mean, he tested like nuclear weapons and like returned to then California, and he was an electrician, and then kind of was just like an electrician during that time. And then so when Kemper was born, this motherfucker weighed dead ass 13 pounds. 13-pound baby. Imagine giving birth to that. Just blood.
No wonder she wanted to fucking strangle him and beat his ass all the time.
Right, honestly. But I think his mom was 6 foot and his dad was 6'7".
Makes sense.
So it makes sense why they had such a big boy.
Yeah, he's thick.
He was a thick baby.
A thick ass boy.
But yeah, so he was the middle child, so he had an older sister and a younger sister. So he was bullied at home and school. Even his sisters bullied him. For being such a big kid, everyone picked on him.
No.
But that's why it's what crazy about Ed Kemper is because he wasn't violent as a kid. He wasn't a mean kid. He was honestly just an easy target. And so they just like everyone picked on him. They think that his mom was had borderline personality disorders. A lot of the symptoms, especially with her crazed mood swings, she was disturbed by men, thought affection was a plot to like turn her son gay. So his dad wasn't super abusive. His dad was actually pretty sweet to Ed. The issue was he wasn't allowed. His dad wasn't allowed to give him affection because his mom thought it was a ploy to make him gay, or would make him gay somehow if his dad was nice to him and like hugged him.
That was more of a common thing or a common thought process for a lot of older generations. They thought that affection from another man, even if it was your father, would turn the son gay.
And then that, like, boys don't need affection because that'll make them a gay.
Yeah, they need to be strong and protective.
But with not even having his father, his mom didn't want anything to do with Ed. I think she thought he was, like... I think from the beginning he thought she, like, thought he was evil and, like, wanted to, like... was, like, crazed. But anyways, so...
I mean, to go on what you said about the borderline personality disorder, I think that's true because he even recounts a time where him and his mom got, like, physically violent, and it was over him going to the dentist to get his teeth whitened or not.
Yeah.
He said that it went... He also said that she was so verbally abusive to the point where he couldn't even imagine, like, anyone else in the world being as bad as she was, and she would try and make it physical. I mean, obviously... And this was later in Ed's life. He's a giant. Yeah. You know, I don't know. Even if his mom is 6 foot, like, he's going to be able to not get hurt by her, I imagine. But the fact that she would even try and make things violent with him over something so trivial as him going to the dentist really says a lot about her character.
Oh, yeah. And so with her being such a crazy bitch, his dad left, I think, when Ed was about 8 or so. And so they moved... Either his dad moved to Montana or they moved to Montana. No, they moved to Montana. So his mom packed him up, moved to Montana. And that's where she started also then heavily drinking and became basically an alcoholic. So, like, the abuse got worse. And to make matters worse is they would make Ed sleep in the basement.
Right.
And so everyone was upstairs because his mom was like, Ed's going to hurt the girls if he sleeps upstairs with us, so we have to put him in the basement to protect the daughters. Which, for an 8-year-old boy who had no predetermined, fucked up issues...
That's the thing, is I wonder why she started doing this. Like, either she had, like, some mental disorders where she thinks Ed or any man is going to hurt her daughters, or there was things going on that, like... made her scared, right? Because, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to throw him down in the basement without any prerequisites of him being violent.
Yeah. I don't know, because, so once he started having to live in the basement, he, like, he actually said, he's like, it literally felt like I was being sent to hell. Like, it was so terrifying and scary and so dark that's when his dark thoughts started to form, was when he was living in the basement alone all the time. And so, and then he talked about how he thought, like, being in the basement was like hell. Let's see. What was that? No, that's later. But so he started having then dark thoughts. I don't know. I think partially why she put him down in the basement because she was, like, disturbed by men, or, like, distrusted men.
Yeah.
So I think that might have been why, especially when her husband just left her and she has to then, like, take care of her daughters. But I mean, and I guess in the end it kind of worked out because then he started having these dark thoughts of, like, wanting to be the only man last man alive. He would play this game with his sisters called the gas chamber game. And so it's basically what they would do is he would roll up his sisters in carpet, like in a rug, and he would have to see who got out the fastest. And it started becoming this, like, dark game where it was like, how much I can get away with / they're trapped. I want to see how long it would take for them to get out of being trapped. So it did start de-escalating quite quickly once he was forced into the basement. I think that might have been, honestly, like,
a little bit of
like, you know,
starting to show signs of it. What?
Yeah, if maybe he didn't have to ever go to the basement, would he still be there to where he is today? But so anyways, he would play those games, and then it started, his sisters would always tease him and stuff, and then he had a crush on one of his teachers, and one of his sisters like, ooh, what are you going to do, kiss her? You should kiss her. And he's like, literally said, I can only kiss her if she's dead.
Oh.
So.
What the fuck?
Started the things, and then one of the fights him and his mom got into was their cat went missing. And she was like, you did something to the cat. And he's like, what the fuck, bitch? No, I didn't. He did. He buried the cat alive. And then once it was dead, he dug it up and then, like, you know, filleted it and, like, fucked with the bones. And then buried it again. So he would do that. And so they couldn't really have a cat because he kept killing the cat. So that was something that was going on as well. So definitely, I don't know. I don't want to be like, him being not loved as a child turned him this way, but I 100% think that's what happened.
Yeah, I definitely think this is a combination of multiple things. I think he was born
a little off.
And then the constant abuse from his mom and now he doesn't have a dad in his life.
Yeah.
And he has two sisters that bully him, and
everyone at school bullies him because he's like 5 foot something at 10.
Yeah,
I don't
just
know,
a
like
giant.
I don't know like how like his size went, but it was like basically like the same concept. I'm trying to think of like. Oh yeah, he would also then play like also games called like electric chair, where he would ask his younger sister to tie him up and flip an imaginary switch where he would then pretend he was electrocuted. So I think he's always wanted death upon himself, because you'll also hear that too when they're like, "What do you plead? And what do you think you deserve as like a punishment?" And he was like, "Torture me to death."
Yeah, he wanted the death penalty. He also openly admitted to planning and trying to plot a thing while he was in prison to kill like a guard or something like that.
Yeah.
In order to get the death sentence, because he didn't get the death sentence.
No, which is wild. Spoiler alert.
I think it's because of his high IQ, which we'll get into. Like,
I think he was just too smart, and they were like,
he composed himself too well to be someone that I don't know. He probably should have still got the death penalty. But we have to say though, like, Ed Kemper did help us
learn
profile.
What serial killers are.
Yeah, like a lot of things that he did as a kid are things that you look for now.
Yeah, like burying your cat alive and then digging it back up.
Yeah,
or playing electric chair.
Yeah,
and gas chamber.
If you guys are all familiar with the Netflix show Mindhunters, he plays someone does a really great job of playing him in that show. But Ed Kemper's always been very open to discussing his problems and his mindset, and it's kind of cool. Like, I mean, it's not cool what he did, but it's cool that he knows he's fucked up and is willing to try and be like, hey,
let's find more of me guys, like more guys like me.
Yeah, maybe we can stop some of these other fucked up people.
Right? But anywho, so a very interesting childhood. He had very dark thoughts, definitely wanted to kill from a young age, definitely killed animals, things like that. Then, around age 14, 15, he then left his mom's in search of his father. No, at 14, he left to search for his father, which he did find, his dad, who then remarried and had more kids. Another reoccurring theme with dad leaving. Are all serial killers just with daddy issues? Is that just like a big fact? Mommy and daddy issues?
I mean, obviously John Wayne Gacy probably. Mary Bell, yeah,
the
absolutely.
Golden State Killer.
Yeah, the Golden State Killer. I mean,
so far, daddy issues for the win.
You know, I definitely think that some of them are born maybe a little wired different, but it really is all about upbringing. You know,
right?
If you're abused all the time as a kid, all you're gonna know is abuse.
That's fair.
And abuse, the extreme levels of abuse, is murder.
Yeah.
So
that's the worst sin of them all.
Yeah.
But. So at 15, he left to find his father, who he, like, kind of then, like, put on a pedestal as, like, John Wayne and, like, as his hero. So he'll, like, I'll go find my dad. He'll treat me better. Which his stepmom was not a fan of. That's for sure.
She wasn't a fan of Ed?
Ed, no. His dad, of course, was a good guy. He was like, yeah, you can come live with us. We'll take you in. Sorry, your mom's a bitch. That's why I left.
Yeah.
You know, basically. Until it got really weird with Ed and his stepmom. His stepmom got to the point where she had to have the dad kick Ed out because Ed would wait outside of her bathroom while she showered. And once she got out of the shower, obviously, like, she's in a robe and she's naked, he would just be staring at her. Oh. When she opens the door, and she was like, she's like, I was terrified he would always follow me around, especially if I was naked. And, like, he would follow her around when she was naked. Like, she'd walk out of the bathroom into her room, and he would, like, kind of, like, follow her and just stare at her. Like, him and his dad were fine, but he had, like, this weird thing with his stepmom. Yeah. A weird thing. He never really said if it was, like, more of, like, oh, you took my dad away, or if it was, like, kind of like a subtle nod, subtle, like, wink, wink, little, like, foreshadowing into, like, how he'll be with co-eds in the future.
Right, and I mean, it's really weird, because later you'll understand that Ed Kemper seems to be very charming.
Yeah.
And it kind of sounded like he was, in a way, I don't want to call him a womanizer, but he didn't really struggle with at least talking to people. And the reason why I say that is there's some hitchhiking stuff I'll get into a little bit later, but he definitely, I don't know. I think all of it is because of his mother still. Like, the stepmom thing, I think he just grew to hate women.
I think it was, he grew to hate women. And I think with his stepmom, it was, maybe he was having a hard time. He was only there for, like, 3 or 4 weeks before his stepmom's like, you need to get the fuck out. And then his dad sent him to his grandparents. Mm-hmm. And so then he lived with his grandparents, which we'll get to in a second. But I think his stepmom was just, I think maybe because he wasn't, like, charming and, like, you know, like a womanizer to her, I think it was, like, first of all, the first woman he lived with that wasn't a sibling related to. And second of all, maybe he was, like, hated her because, like, she took away his mom, or, like, right. His dad. Or maybe he just was kind of fucked up in the head, you know? Like, maybe he was just like, I can kill her. I'm 6'9", bitch.
Well, and it's a weird time for a young man, too. Like, you're 15, yeah. You're 15 years old, and now there's this woman that you've never known, whether she's physically attractive or not, but if she's walking around the house naked or whatever it might be, like, maybe he just struggled with understanding his own.
Like, he was like, I'm horny, but, like, she did.
I don't know what that means. Well, yeah.
But, yeah, so then, after that, obviously, he goes to then his grandparents, which, they lived on a ranch.
Right.
And so he had guns and things like that. And that's what happened was one day when his grandpa was out of town, his grandma wouldn't let him play with his guns. And then, we know where that went.
Straight up blasted her.
Blast, bang, bang, bang.
Like, he straight up blasted his grandma.
Yep.
Which is like, I think it's so, if he was as smart as they say he was, and he was more aware of what he really desired, I think that he did this trying to be poetic. Mm-hmm. Like, well, no, I guess not, because it wasn't his mom's grandma, right?
No, it was his dad's grandma.
Yeah, it was his dad's grandma.
But
so maybe not. But still, like, killed a woman. That's his M.O. That's where it started.
Yeah. But at the same time, he also didn't like his grandparents. He was like, he thought his grandpa was, like, senile and losing it, and that his grandma was constantly emasculating him and his grandfather. So I think his grandma maybe wasn't even, like, that bad to live with, but just that little like, jabs. Those little jabs probably just brought him right back to his mom that he left and just snapped him, especially when he was, like, cleaning or playing with his guns, and she's like, no, put it away. So he shot her, which then, this is, like, shows, like, his high IQ, kind of, like, what an interesting man he is, and, like, his way of thinking, because once he kills his grandma, he literally then waits on his porch for his grandpa to come home, and then once his grandpa comes home, bang, bang, kills his grandpa, and his reasoning is because he was senile. Not even that. It was mostly because, well, I didn't want my grandpa to have to live without his wife. Like, like...
Just such a wild thought process.
It's such a wild thought process because, like, I'm not saying, like, I don't want to justify it and be like, no, that kind of makes sense. But, like, it kind of makes sense, you know what I mean?
In a dark, twisted way,
yeah,
it makes sense. Like his grandpa was probably going to die sooner or later.
And like, you don't want him to live without his wife,
yeah,
his love of his life, you know?
He wouldn't want to have to put... He maybe didn't hate his grandpa as much as his grandma, but he didn't want to have to put his grandpa through now having to suffer
without
through
his
this
grandma.
trauma. Yeah.
So instead, just kills his grandpa, which... Because it, like, makes me think of, like, The Notebook, when, like, they die together on the bed. That's what, like, I kind of like the thought process of, like, well, you lose the love of your life, and you're already that old. What's the point of living?
Right.
So, like, I get where Ed Kemper, like, came from with that, but it's so dark because, like, logistically, if I killed my grandparents or my grandma, I would never think to kill my grandpa so he doesn't have to deal with the loss of his wife.
Right.
I never would think of that, but that's just, like, the craziness that is Ed Kemper and his wild logic and his wild thought process.
The kids call that a big brain move.
Big brain.
Big brain move.
A big brain because a big strong boy.
Big strong.
Big strong. But yeah, so obviously then he then calls himself in and was like, yep, I did this. Get me.
I kind of wonder too what the whole... Because he not only did he call himself in when he killed his grandparents, but you'll later find out that he calls himself in after he kills his mother. So I wonder if it's almost like, do you think that this, when he killed his grandparents, he was already expecting that he would have got a death penalty or something? And do you think he already wanted to die?
I think it's more of along the lines of why he then turned himself in the future. I think he knew how bad he was as a person, and he's like, oh, someone needs to put me away.
Yeah.
So I don't keep doing it. Which didn't turn out because then they try him as an adult, but they sent him to a psych ward essentially because he was so fucking big as a 15-year-old. I'm assuming by 15 he's like 5'11", 6 foot. He has to be pretty peaking to where he is because he was in the psych ward for 6 years, and by the end of the psych ward, at
6'9".
Yeah, at 21 years old, he was 6'9", 300 pounds. So I'm assuming, because that's why they did send him to an adult one, is because he was such a fucking huge kid.
Yeah.
That they were like,
this is an adult.
This is fucking basically an adult. This guy can bench me, a cop, you know?
Yeah,
and, like, so...
You send him with other kids, he's gonna fuck those kids up.
Yeah, I think they were more worried about the kids than they are going to be about the adults, which we all know he could fuck up the adults easier than the kids.
I'm also curious, too, which I couldn't find any information about it when he was younger, but if he developed his wits and charm and basically his intelligence while he was in the psych ward, or if before this, when he killed his grandparents, if he already had that wit about him, and that's why they were like, this 15-year-old doesn't really seem like a teenager. He's pretty mature,
and he's pretty smart for his age. I think it was a mixture of, I think like he's like he was born with that lure, that showmanship of being like the cool guy.
Yeah.
I think he kind of already had it, but then when he was in the psych ward being taken care of, he like grew that because so when he was 15 he was taken in, and by like before he left and like by the time he's just like living there, they literally let him have free range.
Yeah. He
can do whatever the fuck he wants. He's a model prisoner.
Yeah.
They're literally even questioning if he's mentally insane. He's actually giving like psych eval tests to other patients,
which is just insane.
Which is immoral. If you like nowadays, you couldn't get away with that shit. You're like no free labor on that that kind of way. But he like in that psych ward, they just literally were like, we don't understand why you're here. We really don't understand why you're here. And that's what's crazy is that they never even saw his predetermined craziness coming.
No.
Like they just did, and they were just like, that's fine. And so they released him because technically he got life. When he was a 15-year-old, but he was so charming and so helpful and so seems like a normal kid, normal guy. He's growing up fine, that they were like, we'll let you free and we'll sponge your record.
That happened after,
That was after. Yeah. That was after. It was like a couple years after when he like has on parole and he's doing fine. But still, they were like, yes. Yeah, what was it? 3 years after.
What I think's interesting, and we can start getting into him as Ed Kemper as an adult, is the fact that I imagine through the years of being in the psych ward, he definitely talked about how awful his mother was.
Yeah.
And how she might be the reason why he killed his grandparents or whatever it might be. Well, he got put in the custody of his mother when he got released. And, I mean, it's just... I want to know if he never had to talk to his mother again. If his mother had either passed away or gone away or disappeared.
Yeah.
If we would have gotten Ed Kemper, the co-ed killer, or if we would have just gotten 6'9", Ed Kemper, the funny, charming, local public worker or whatever he is.
The BFGTILSFM.
Yeah, minus the last section.
That I'd let, minus the SM. The big friendly giant that I'd let fuck me.
Yeah, exactly.
Just take out the S.
Yeah.
No S. No skull fucking today.
Just the normal, he's charming. Definitely.
He's a handsome dude.
Yeah, definitely rearrange.
6'9", he can, you like a rag doll. No.
Just
big boy.
Grab you from the shirt and just yeet you across the bedroom.
Yeah, and then,
Yeah.
Murder.
You know what they say, right? Even if he has a small wiener being 6'9", that thing's still like a fucking, just a tree trunk.
It just swings around.
Yeah. It's got a mind of its own. So anyways, we won't get on Ed Kemper's wiener because that's a whole other topic of discussion.
Patreon.
It is interesting. He had to get released into someone's custody, I believe. And I imagine he probably would never have picked his mother, but who else is there? His mother was there for him. Well, his mother was there, and I think she got off on it. I think that she got off on abusing him and treating him like shit because of the father leaving her.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's pictures of his father, but I'm sure they probably look alike. If he was 6'7", Ed Kemper 6'9", I'm sure there's similarities, so I imagine she sees her husband and her son and wants to bully him because it's like, oh, well, fuck you. My husband left. You're just like my husband. Yeah.
And I think she just had some issues. I think she just wasn't fit to be a mother. At the time, women having borderline personality disorder would warrant a lobotomy. Yeah. Actually, not really. That was 50 years prior, it would have been a lobotomy, but it still was taboo to have mental disorders.
Yes.
And so definitely wasn't fit to be a mom, or at least a mom to the son, because she was fine to her daughters. She was a great mom to her daughters. Put those girls on a pedestal.
Right.
Wow. Ed Kemper was literally, when what he described, hell.
So yeah, he was put on parole, and like Holly mentioned, after a few years of being on parole, because of how charming he is, he was able to convince his parole officers to expunge his juvenile record, thus pretty much eliminating his whole entire, hey, I murdered my 2 grandparents thing.
Yeah. For funsies. Well, because they won't let me play with my guns.
Yeah. Which is kind of crazy if you think about it, because we also had this happen with John Wayne Gacy, where his whole entire record of him doing that shit in the city he was before he went back home was it never got transferred over. So when he got in trouble, no one knew that he was on parole.
That he had a predetermined relation, a predetermined record of touching little boys. Yeah. So they didn't know he was already a
They thought
pedophile.
It was his first offense.
They were it was a first offense, so they're well, we're not going to get you because you technically didn't do anything. Yeah. We just don't know about the 33 bodies that are in your house.
So
28 bodies, sorry.
I really, it's tough to put your own mind into a serial killer's thing, but the fact that he took the time to get his juvenile record expunged, either through charming or through hard work or whatever it was he was doing that made it happen, it makes me wonder if he really did want to erase the past and move on, but being around his mother was just so difficult.
Yeah, because then once he was living with his mother, he recalls there was almost fist fights. They would just get into fights on fights on fights. But do you want to hear a little, like, what his psychiatrist said about...
Please.
What his, like, psychiatrist says the reason why they expunged it? They were like, if I were to see this patient without having any history available or getting any history from him, I would think we were dealing with a very well-adjusted young man who had innate intelligence and who was free of psychiatric illness. It is, in my opinion, that he has been an excellent response to the years of treatments and rehabilitation, and I would see no psychiatric reason to consider him to be any danger to himself or any member of society. Since it may allow him more freedom as an adult to develop his potential, I would consider it reasonable to permanently expunge his juvenile record. They literally thought he was so rehabilitated as a human being
that he was just...
They were like, they're like, if I didn't know he killed his grandparents, I thought he was just the best guy of the world.
Right.
Which you find out later in his adulthood, right when he's still killing people, he was.
Yeah.
They called him Big Ed. He was just the cool, friendly giant.
He had a lot of good things going from him. And I do want to point this out as just like a weird side bit. So because of Ed's parole, he had to do some sort of schooling. It was a part of his deal. So he did attend some community college in hopes of becoming a police officer.
Yeah.
Which is just, adds to the similarities of other people like our Golden State Killer who really wanted to be a police officer but couldn't.
Yeah.
Part of me wonders, do you think they wanted to be a police officer? The chance they might be able to kill some people?
Maybe. I mean, the Golden State Killer was a police officer, remember?
Yeah, not for long, though.
Not for, because he stole.
Yeah.
Stupid. Anyways, but yeah, no, I think so, because I think you then have the knowledge. I think it's like a good way to go pat to other people. And it also helps you learn the laws and learn the techniques police officers have so you can go against. Which, I don't think, because did he become a highway patrolman?
No.
Ed Kemper? No, he really wanted to, but he was friends, literally, with all the cops. Yeah. He was best friends. I think because he wanted to so bad and he tried to be a police officer, they were still like, be our buddy, Fred. Come hang out.
They had, there was a bar that they would go, that all the police officers hung out at. It was called something funny. It was like jury duty or...
Yeah, something
along those lines, but they...
Jury room.
Jury room, yeah. They were quoted saying that Ed Kemper was a friendly nuisance, meaning like when I hear that, that's like a guy who doesn't get invited but shows up anyways, and he's there just to hang out and like
have a
good time. Like, no one disliked him, but he wasn't there. He wasn't asked to be there.
Yeah.
What's interesting is Ed Kemper decided to move out from his mother's house, which is obviously the best idea.
Yeah.
And he got a job in the highway department. So I don't really know what that means. I kind of thought it was like...
It's like the Department of Transportation. I don't know if that means he was like a bus driver.
Yeah.
Or like he took coins like at the subways.
I didn't
think they have subways or anything.
No, I even thought maybe like if it was a toll road, you had to like be one of the toll people.
Road.
They don't...
You gotta pay the tolls.
Yeah.
To touch the boy's hole.
Yeah, you gotta pay the troll toll. I personally couldn't find much information on what specific duties he had doing that type of line of work.
Basically he just had a bunch of different jobs because he was then like a janitor at one point.
Yeah.
He kind of just did a bunch of menial jobs so that way he could live on his own away from his mother because he would literally be starting to fist fight with his mom.
Yeah, what I was talking about earlier, I have the direct quote. I forgot I wrote it down. So this is from Kemper about his awful relationship and fights he had with his mother. And this is what he said. My mother and I started right in our horrendous battles, just horrible battles, violent and vicious. I've never been in such a vicious verbal battle with anyone. It would go to fists with a man, but this was my mother, and I couldn't stand the thought of my mother and I doing these things. She insisted on it, and just over stupid things. I remember one roof raiser was over whether I should have my teeth cleaned.
Because, they say, care about your teeth, gay.
Yeah. so they would literally go to hands
over
like menial shit, like something that's not even relevant.
Like, who cares if he goes and gets his teeth cleaned? Everyone should twice a year. So your dentist sends you postcards being like, "Miss me, bitch."
See, I do honestly think, like, reading about him as a young adult, I think that he was trying to not turn into the co-ed killer. I think he was trying to do his best because he moved out with a friend, but he was never able to really get away from his mom because she would surprise him all the time when he was at his friend's house.
Yeah.
She would call and harass him. She would show up at random times to go harass him. Plus, on top of this, Ed kind of had a money problem, which is, what 20-year-old doesn't have a money problem. And, so he ended up having to go back and forth between, living with his mom, trying to go out on his own, living at home with all the fucking harassment and bullying and the fights. Like, it's just not a great living situation.
No.
And I think that if she was never, like I said, if she was never in the picture, I don't think he would have. I foresee him maybe dabbling into some like darker level of like kink or something along those lines.
I could see him either being like a real like kink master, or just a normal guy.
Yeah, because I mean, back in the 70s and stuff, like BDSM wasn't as relevant as it is today, but I could see him being like in that type of realm because of his fucked up past.
Yeah.
But I don't think he would have turned into the co-ed killer, but he just couldn't get away from his mom.
No, I mean, if he got away when his dad left and he left with his dad, we probably wouldn't have the co-ed killer, to be honest. I can 100% see that and believe it. But so then his mom would like always visit him and just harass him, but he was always financially dependent kind of on her because he would kind of like have to go back to live with her because he couldn't save money until he got hit by a car.
Yeah, he was driving a motorcycle and got into a car accident. Yeah,
which is wild. And he got a settlement and was able to. So just to reflect on how much his settlement was, it would be $90,000 in 2008. So he got a lump sum of money.
Oh, plenty of cash to
get out of that.
But here's the thing, right? Is because of that money,
he bought the car.
The infamous 69 giggity Ford Galaxy, which I believe is bright yellow or something like that.
It's a looker.
Yeah, it's a real looker. If you guys don't know what a Ford Galaxy looks like, it's not the prettiest car, but it definitely you wouldn't miss it, especially having a bright color.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know what color he had, but yeah, those babies, that's a car.
I think they I'm trying to think what Tuna Cruiser. Was the old term they used to call cars like that because it's so big.
And it's a tuna can. It looks like you can just peel it open.
Yeah, exactly.
And I bet for a guy like that, he needs something that's hefty. But luckily for him to get hit and get that car,
right.
We come back to then the murders.
Yeah, so I want to get into a couple things before we talk about the murders. One, right in the middle of his murdering, like...
Oh, yeah.
He actually got engaged to a girl that he met who was in high school. Keep in mind, Ed Kemper was 21 and older at this point.
Yeah. No more than like 20... I'd assume probably 23, 24?
Yeah. He met a high school girl and got engaged to her on March of 1973. And keep in mind, April of 73 is when he got caught for being the co-ed killer.
Yeah.
So he was 1 month. He got engaged for 1 month. And through that whole time, he was murdering people.
Murdering hella lot more people.
He also, which this is very interesting. So before he started murdering, he said that he picked up a lot of hitchhikers.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of hitchhikers. He said over 100 hitchhikers. And he claimed those were all before something he calls his little zapples.
Little zapples.
And what a little Zapple is to his mind is homicidal sexual urges.
Well, Zapple.
So if you try and think of that as a normal person, right, that he would just get this like sudden urge out of nowhere. It would just hit him and be like, I want to fucking kill and fuck that person's dead body.
Yeah.
That's literally what he's talking about, which is crazy. Now, before we get into the murders, I do want to give everyone a warning. You know, we've been joking about some edgy shit, but
yeah, it's all jokes. Please don't do that to me.
There is some fucked up stuff that he did.
Yes.
With his murders, so I want to give everyone a warning. Like, if you got a queasy stomach and don't like hearing about messed up shit, you know, maybe skip ahead or give us a mute for a couple minutes because it's pretty raunchy.
It's pretty bad, but yeah. So, like Wes was saying, between, like, what was it, May 1972 and April of 1973, Kemper killed 8 people, which he kind of learned the technique of picking up women, letting them go, picking up women, letting them go. Kind of he learned how easy it was and how trusting women were. Because you have to think, too, a lot of the places he would pick up is from the college that his mom worked at, and he had a parking pass to go visit his mom.
Yeah.
So a lot of women would go, oh, you're a student here. I'll go with you.
Well, on top of the fact that all the reports say that, I mean, you can look at pictures of when Ed Kemper got arrested. No joke, he's a pretty handsome fella.
That's why I made the acronym for him.
Yeah, like he's not an ugly, grotesque 6'9" giant scary guy. He's well handsome. Trimmed. He's handsome.
Got a nice weird stash.
Yeah, that was hot shit in the 70s.
Yeah.
You know, and everyone said he was charming. He got along with everybody. So like, he picked up hitchhikers all the time. So he's been able to practice this etiquette of like, oh, hey, do you need a ride? Like, I'm going here. Like, if he was picking up these hitchhikers in good faith and then just decided to start killing, like, I want to know how big brain his thought process was on the evil. Was he practicing? Or do you think that it just happened so much and then finally his urges just took over?
I think he was practicing because he would slowly start building his supply of devices to use, like guns, knives, bags, handcuffs, things like that. So I think it was a slow progression, and I think it was like if you give an example, like the Golden State Killer, he was the ransack, whatever.
The ransacker.
But he would then burgle, and then burgle more, and then he would steal, and then he would then torture. Elevated. So I think this was him trying it out, because also too, you got to remember, this was in Santa Cruz, which was at the time considered the murder capital of the world.
Right.
So on top of him practicing picking up women, he was hanging out with cop friends and being like, hey, tell me more about these murders. And so he learned kind of like things like that.
To riff off what you said about Santa Cruz being the murder capital of the world, Ed Kemper was actually never thought to be the Coed killer. There was another guy by the name of Herbert Mullen, who was another serial killer, and everyone thought that Herbert Mullen was the Coed killer.
Yeah, until you find out, no, he was just killing families.
Yeah, he was just straight up killing families.
He was just straight up killing like anybody, everybody. He wasn't, but his also was somewhat similar, but they then weren't as horrendous as
the after murder.
Yeah, the after murder part was just like, this seems a little off. But yeah, no one looked at Ed because, well, first of all, he was friends with the cops.
Yeah. They
would never think Big Ed, that just kind of comes out of nowhere, makes a few jokes.
I think the reason why Ed Kemper, aside from his size being such a big characteristic trait, I think the reason why he's still so relevant in like serial killer culture is because of the horrendous after death things that he did. Because no one knows who the guy's name I just said is. He's not a household serial killer name.
Oh no! But
because of the things that Ed Kemper did to bodies, I think is what really kept him.
Makes him a staple.
Yeah, it makes him a staple.
Sorry.
So in between the years of 72 and 73, Kemper killed a total of 8 people. And it's exactly how he would pick up hitchhikers. He would go, find them, and then
somehow get them to an isolated forest.
Yeah, an isolated area. And it seemed, to me, reading it, it sounded like it was just one of those things where he got to the point where he's like, yep, today's the day.
I'm going to do it today. Tonight's the night.
He didn't, like, you know, there's some serial killers who have kind of like a specific way of killing their victims. His was all across the board. He shot them, he stabbed some of them, he smothered some of them, he strangled some of them. And then he would take their bodies back home. And this is where I wanted to give the warning for, was these types of things, because it's pretty bad. He would take the bodies back home where he would decapitate them, perform urolumation, which is he would skull fuck them, the dead bodies' heads, and have sexual intercourse with their corpses, and then completely dismember them.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, is real scary shit.
Yeah. And also, too, it seemed like every single time he did it a little bit different. Like, there was one, I think the saddest one, in my opinion, was this 15-year-old girl he picked up that missed her bus on her dance class, and he was like, oh, I'll take you home, don't worry, come in. And he, like, obviously takes her somewhere isolated and was going to kill her and had a gun, but somehow got himself locked out of his own car, and at gunpoint somehow convinced this girl to let him back into his car. That's how charming he was. This girl at gunpoint sees him outside of the car, locked out, and still lets him back in, where he then strangles her, tortures, rapes, kills her, which then, fun thing, he then puts her body in the back of the truck and goes to the bar and has a few drinks, where then he then dismembers and does more to the body.
Right.
Which, so, like, everything he does is just a little bit different, where he's almost like, it almost seems like he's, like, learning new tricks, because, like, he wouldn't sometimes pick up one victim. A lot of the times he had 2 at a time that he dealt with.
Right. And so there was a total of 5 college students that we know of.
Yeah.
1 high school student, his mother, and his mother's best friend.
Yeah.
So 8 between that year's worth of time, and then his 2 grandparents, making a total of 10 murders in total for Kemper. He did say, though, in interviews, so, like, if you guys ever watched the show Mindhunters, I believe it's mostly nonfiction, trying to explain how we came to the point of being able to case serial killers.
Yeah. It's about the main character guy who was...
I don't remember his name.
I don't remember his name. All I can remember, because I've only seen the first 3 episodes, is, like, his sexual interactions with that one girl.
Oh,
where
yeah.
she's like, I'm not gonna, she's like, you never had that? And he's like, what? And then she, like, gives him a blowjob, and he's like, what is this?
Yeah. What?
I'm a new man. But yeah, so it's about this guy who then learns the profile of a serial killer.
Yeah, it's like the beginning of the FBI.
Yeah, the beginning of the FBI.
Or it may not be the beginning of the FBI, but it was the beginning of the branch that worked towards trying to stop serial killers.
Yeah, and like
they created serial killer terms.
Yeah, like figured out what a serial killer was, because in the 70s, serial killers weren't a thing. It was just people got killed, but no one knew that they were all connected.
Right.
And that's why you have so many serial killers that were burnt, like, around this time, is because people are finally being like, something's not adding up.
Yeah, BTK,
John Gacy, Dahmer,
yeah,
Ted Bundy, Night Strangler. Anyways.
So, Kemper was involved in this process a lot.
Yeah.
When he was when he finally got tried for his murders, they didn't give him the death sentence. He was sentenced to multiple lives in prison, whatever it be.
7, 8 lives.
Kemper did do a lot of interviews, and a lot of them were with these agents trying to understand why Ed Kemper was like this, and if learning about Ed Kemper could potentially stop future serial killers or current serial killers.
Mm.
And one of the things that he talked about in his interviews was he searched for his victims after having arguments with his mother.
That would make sense.
So he wanted to kill his mom so bad, but couldn't because that's his mom. That's who created him.
You can't kill what brought you into the world.
He would leave and go and find women to kill in place of killing his mom.
Yeah. Which then one day he was like, you know what? I've had enough. And he goes to his mom's house and kills his mom, who lived with her best friend at the time. So he kills both of them. And what wasn't it? Okay, so he went to his mom's house, killed them both, hid his mom's friend's body in the closet, and then leaves. Because initially he was going to get away with it and didn't want to.
Right.
He wanted to get away with it and he just didn't want to, have that on him. And so he leaves to, what was it, Colorado? Or somewhere.
Something like that.
He leaves the state anyways. So he commits the murders. He does all the bad things to his mom and his friends, her friends. He then drove nonstop to something Colorado, and literally just drives. He literally 1,000 miles nonstop just goes. Until he realized, he felt so bad, and he knew he wasn't going to be able to stop. Even though he basically killed the source of the reason why he was killing in the first place.
Sorry.
Oh, you're good. No worries. Sounds. But yeah, he would, so wanting to kill his mom so bad that once he did, he just, gets the fuck out of there. Because he's like, I don't think he, I think it was probably a process that he's like, I fucking did it.
Yeah.
I did it finally. And then he goes to Colorado, and then he calls then the police in California and was like, hey, this is Ed. I just killed my mom and her best friend. And they're like, fuck off, Ed. You're just fucking with us. And he's like, no, I really did it. This is the address. I would go check. I killed them. This is what I did to their bodies. And they thought Ed was pranking them.
Yeah.
They genuinely thought he was just joshing them around, been like, Big Ed wouldn't do that.
Yeah, you're crazy, Ed.
And crazy Ed. And he's like, this is where I'm at. You should come arrest me. And they're like,
oh, Ed.
Oh, Ed. And then I don't remember what it was that kind of made them be like, maybe we should check it out. But I think it was how many, I think it was asking to, seriously? Yeah, and then what then motivated them more was then admitting to the murders of the 6 other women and being like, this is how it happened. And some of the details were when you're trying to find a killer, you don't put all the details out. So
right.
If they accidentally slip up and tell you one of the details that hasn't been released to the press, they can get you kind of thing. That's what Ed did. He was like, I did this. And they're like, no one should know about that. We didn't tell you. It wasn't in the news. That's when they were like, okay, we'll go check it out. And then what they did was then they found the bodies. Then the Colorado police came and picked them up. And then they shipped them back to California to wait trial.
What's interesting to me is he's talked a lot about how he felt about it. I don't think he would have ever been, I'm sure he would have been caught, right? If he didn't call them, they would have eventually had to go look for the mother and the mother's friend. Mm-hmm. So I imagine he probably would have been able to stay out of incarceration forever. But if he would have cleaned up that crime scene, he may have never even got caught. Because they had no idea who the Coed killer was. No,
they had no idea that Ed would. They probably would have thought that some freak accident happened to Ed and his mom's friend. Ed's mom and his friend. So they probably wouldn't even have looked at Ed. He probably could have been like, I haven't seen my mother in weeks.
Yeah.
What happened to her? And also since his record's been expunged and probably all of his psychiatric hate towards his mom has been, locked away, no one can see it, kind of like...
I almost wonder too if maybe this was, if he called himself in, because I think he truly knew that he was evil, like you said before.
He knew.
But he also he killed his mother, and I almost wonder if that just didn't, now there's no purpose for him.
Yeah. Well, it was partially because I think he even, I don't know if this is true, so that's why I didn't really bring it up. Because I can't remember if I read this correctly, but I think after he killed his mom, he literally did pick up more women. He picked up one more set of women and was like, I can do it again. These women trust me. And that's when he knew. He dropped them off at their location, and then he just booked it out of California. Because I think he knew, and that's why he called himself in, because he knew he wasn't going to be able to stop. Because, yes, he killed his mother. The reason why he started in the beginning was, but he still knew he had those urges, and he was never going to truly stop because he is what he is now.
Right.
Like, it was like he was too far gone, and he knew he was too far gone. Because I think once he killed his mom, he was like, oh, I don't need to do it anymore. And that's why he did pick up the Coeds, because he can prove to himself he can just drop them off and not kill them. But he still had such a bad urge that he was like, realistically,
I'll keep going.
I'm gonna keep going.
I don't.
That's why it's so fucking crazy, is that he's such a smart man that he self-diagnoses himself, and he knows that he's not going to be doing well.
I mean, I don't think, at least in my knowledge of serial killers, there's anyone quite like him as far as like the self-awareness. Like, I think a lot of serial killers know what they're doing is fucked up. Like, they just don't care, or they morally it just doesn't bother them.
No.
Where him, I think morally it did.
Like, it bothered him enough that he was like, he knew it was wrong, but he couldn't stop himself still. Like, I think he just knew that, like, animalistic part of him as Ed Kemper was, I'm going to keep killing because this is all I know and all I can do.
No.
And I don't think he would, like... So I think that's why he turned himself in, because he did... If I remember it correctly, I could be making that up. But it would make sense, because I think he did pick up Coeds, dropped him off, was like, I cannot do it. And then he was like, no, I'm going to fucking do it again. Yeah. Like, I just know I am. But the thing is, he was so good at hiding it, no one even looked at Ed.
No.
So he could have just kept going, but he chose not to.
Which, I mean...
Like, thank God.
Guess, yeah, I mean, that's great.
Like, I'm glad enough that he has that conscience enough to stop himself. But, I mean, he still did what he did. But, yeah, so then he was captured, released back onto, got back to California. Then he had his trial, which he did try to kill himself multiple times when he was captured, because he didn't, like, for trial, his counsel was like, the counsel was like, you should not plead guilty, plead insanity.
Yep.
And 3 psychiatrists diagnosed him legally sane.
Legally sane.
He is legally sane to the point where they're like, you are just so fucking smart that there is no way you can say you didn't not know what you were doing.
I didn't actually look this up, but I'm kind of curious. Do you think they didn't give him the death penalty because they wanted to learn from him?
I think, let's see.
I never was able to find an answer to that question. I didn't dig that hard, so maybe that's an obvious one for some of you other crime fans, but...
Yeah, so it doesn't really say anywhere why he didn't, but he did ask for the death penalty with death by torture.
Yeah.
So he did have, like, a masochistic, was that the word, where, like, you want pain? Like, he did have that carnal desire to be tortured and killed. Because, I mean, he would have his when he was a kid, he would have his sisters tie him up.
Yeah.
So he could pretend that he's, like, being electrocuted. So I think he's always, I don't know if I would say he was, I mean, obviously he was suicidal. He tried to kill himself 3 times in jail, but I almost don't think it was, like, he wanted to kill himself because, like, he was sad or depressed. I think he just was like, this is what you do. This is what you do with people who are killers. You gotta kill them.
Yeah.
I think he was just...
He knew that he was
he was just on such a different wavelength of thinking that, like, it's mind-blowing, because, like, who thinks like that? And also, who requests death by torture? That's not even part of the death penalty, like, options. You get lethal injection, electrocution, firing range, or that's basically it. You really only get those 3, yet he asked for torture. Who in their budget has that kind of money to torture a man? A 6'9", 300-pound man.
It's definitely interesting, though, to me that I don't know. It'd be cool cool in a morbid type of way to understand more of like that side of things, like why because like from all the research they did, they were trying to research why a serial killer is a serial killer.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a lot of research done on why he felt like he should die.
No.
Was it because he was mentally like just done with everything? Was it because he knew how evil he was and that's what happens to evil people? Was it just like, oh, I'm depressed and tired of it?
Any
like
point of living.
There's
not really much on his like mental health after the fact, or like why he wanted to kill himself or felt the need to kill myself. That's one that I'm like, I would love to know why he wanted to kill himself.
Yeah.
What was his logic behind it? Like, what was his...
Yeah, the reasoning.
The reasoning, which, hey, beats fucking me.
Yeah. Something that probably could be discussed for a long, long time. As far as, like, trial goes, though, I mean...
It's pretty straightforward. He didn't deny anything.
Yeah,
3 psychiatric people were like, no, he's sane. Just keep going.
It is pretty...
It was like a 5-hour deliberation where everyone's like, no. That's what kind of like... What makes me wonder, too, is why they didn't give him the death penalty. If maybe because he was so forthcoming and truthful to how he was. Because, like, I mean, like, Gacy tried to deny.
Right.
Dahmer admitted, but, like, Bundy tried to play it off as, like, no, I didn't do anything. So I wonder if it's because he was so helpful and so, like, this is what I did. This is that. And I think, because, like, I mean... I get what you're saying with maybe they wanted to keep him around for, like, studying, but technically they could have done that before they killed him, because, like...
Yeah, you're on death row for a while.
You're on death row for a while, because, like, I mean, Gacy was on death row for almost 20 years,
right.
Living comfortably.
Very comfortably.
Very comfortably. That's the bullshit about a death penalty, is it costs more money to have the death penalty than it is just to incarcerate someone for the rest of their life. Yep. It literally costs the taxpayers millions upon millions to kill somebody than it does $500,000 to keep them alive the rest of their year just in regular jail.
Yeah, I watched a thing on inmates who were on this death row. I don't remember the city or whatever. Dude, this one guy's cell was pretty fucking dope. I'm not gonna lie.
You're like,
he had like a like a 14-inch TV. He had all this shit that he could work on. Like it wasn't any bigger than this room, but he had room to like
exercise.
Do push-ups and sit-ups, like jumping jacks. Like he had books on books. He had shit that he could keep himself entertained for pretty much ever. Forever. On top of TV. Having TV, like
that's a privilege.
That
should be a privilege.
I know people who live in their house and all they do is watch TV. So like having that in prison is like having it fucking home at that point.
Yeah, but I think what's most interesting, besides like. I don't want to get too much into like the interviews with Ed Kemper, and we all know he was very helpful in like developing what a serial killer is because he was so knowledgeable and helpful that way. Watch Mindhunters, because I think that's the best way you're going to get the full story of Ed Kemper like that. I want to talk about him being in the prison because he's kind of fucking wild. So he was housed at the same place as the guy Robert Mullen and Charles Manson was. But, so Robert Mullen and Kemper at the same time kind of had the same thing going on. Like, they were kind of the same thing. But Kemper actually thought of him higher as Mullen because he then described Mullen as just a cold-blooded killer killing everybody he saw for no reason. So I think with Kemper, too, he also put himself on a higher pedestal because he did it in the sense of, like, because of his mom. And because of the reason why he did it was because of his mom and like things like that. But fun thing with Mullen was he was 5'7", so a foot shorter than Kemper. And Kemper stated that Mullen had a habit of singing and bothering people when someone was trying to watch TV. So Kemper would literally throw water and literally keep Mullen in his place. Like, the thing is with Kemper is that he was like a prison guard. He would keep the prisoners in line.
Yeah.
He was like the motherfucker that, like, kept that place like in check on the inside, because he would throw water at him. When he was being good, he would give him peanuts like a fucking dog.
Yeah.
So like, literally said, and then when he was a good boy, I'd give him peanuts. Herbert liked peanuts. That was just the way. And then basically he knew so much about psychology that he would give him peanuts to the point where Mullen would ask him if it was okay if he could sing. And he's like, Kemper's like, that's a behavioral modification treatment. This motherfucker knew what he was doing.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I understand now why he was giving tests to other psychiatric patients when he was a psychiatric patient himself.
Did we ever find out if Ed Kemper was based, or if Hannibal Lecter was kind of loosely based off him?
Yeah, so he was actually in pop culture. He was actually inspired for Buffalo Bill's character. I'm not exactly sure why he was inspired by, like, for Buffalo Bill. I'm not exactly sure, because Buffalo Bill, because we just did Silence of the Lambs, go check it out, read between the lines. Buffalo Bill was definitely more of like a... He was like a man who wanted to transform into a woman, so he would skin women. So that's why I was like, I don't see the comparison. I don't really see a big comparison. I can see him being a Hannibal Lecter, because he also admitted to being a kind of a cannibal, because he did try the meat of some of his victims. He cooked it up and was like, why not? The only thing with Buffalo Bill that I even see compared to Ed Kemper is Buffalo Bill did have some sort of mommy problem. Or maybe that mommy desire. Yeah, he did have like a mommy desire. But and maybe the way, because he picked up his victims, he would just like find certain women that looked away. Sure. Yeah. Maybe I don't. I guess I could see like a loose inspiration. Yeah. But not. In American Psycho, he has some of the attributes of the main character in it is from Ed Kemper, especially with his Talk to Ed Gein from Mindhunters. Yep. Kind of like finding that psychology. System of a Down has a song written about Ed Kemper. Yep. He's heavy in pop culture. Oh, big pop culture. I'm trying to look at like all the things. Tons of songs kind of like based off of him. There's literally a song called Temper Temper Mr. Kemper by the Celibate Rifles. Oh, the Celibate Rifles, huh? Yeah. Hell yeah, that sounds pretty punk to me. And then California by Church of Misery. And then Fortress of System of Down. Yeah. So there's quite a few different bands that like made songs kind of over, or the ideas of Ed Kemper. But yeah, other than that, there really wasn't much like pop culture using. Dean Koon used him in a book, just like his character, or him as a person kind of made one of his characters loosely based off of him. So yeah, I mean, for being what he is, he was denied parole multiple times, of course. His fiance's parents were like, do not release her name, so we don't even know who she is. Apparently he even did some like audiobooks. Oh, really? So like he would do audiobooks. He was in charge of inmates' appointments with their psychiatrists. I want to know. He was so much. I mean, this is something that I'll do on my personal time, but I wonder if Ed Kemper now, because he's he's pretty old. He's born in, what did you say, 48? Yeah, 1948. So he's well over 70. Yeah. I wonder if Ed Kemper feels, what word can I use? Like, fulfilled. By being a model prisoner? Yeah, I want to know if Ed Kemper feels like he is, like, satisfied with his life now? Yeah. Like, how's he doing? How you feeling on the inside, Big Ed? Yeah, because, I mean, obviously he wanted to die. He didn't. And he still isn't dead. Mm-mm. So I wonder if he still feels like he shouldn't be alive. I wonder if he, like, I don't want to say if he enjoyed his life in these, 50, 60 years in prison, but I wonder if he didn't hate it as much as we think he might have. I wonder that, too. I could see it because, I mean, like, like, once he was in prison, he got roles. Like, he was scheduling people's appointments with their psychiatrist, was looking over the ceramics classes. He actually had to give up his position because he had a stroke, so now he just kind of chills out.
Yeah.
But to show what a model prisoner he was, it wasn't until 2016 where he got his first rule violation. So for fucking, I can't do math, 30 years? 20 years? 30 years.
74, so...
74.
Right? Because
so I don't... 40 years.
Yeah. Probably
so 40-ish, plus 40. So within, like, 40 years, most of the time everyone has, like, shots and, like, has to go to, like, gets in trouble in jail. He did not get his first one, and that was only because he couldn't produce a pee sample.
Yeah.
So I don't know if maybe, like, he did something, like he took a drug, so he didn't want. He was like, I'm not going to provide one. Or if he was just being stubborn and was like, you guys know I'm good, I'm not going to do it. 40 years he hasn't had any rule violations.
It's crazy.
That's insane. That's insane to me. Because most of the time when you're in jail, like, you do a little something out of the line, and you're getting a shot. Yeah. But no, Ed Kemper was such a model prisoner that he never even got a rule violation until 2016, 40 years later.
I don't have much else to close out on. I mean, we usually talk about what we think the turning point was, like, that turned him into who he is. I really don't know if there was a turning point. I think it was just...
I think it was just a lead up. I mean, I think the turning point could be, like, his dad leaving and him losing his only support he ever had, essentially, and then being locked in a basement most of his life. Yeah,
and I think that just on top of everything else just
I think he would have...
snowballed.
I think if he had a different mom and his dad stayed, it probably wouldn't have gotten to where it was. But then again, you never know, because, I mean, he still had dark thoughts and urges, you know what I mean?
I do have a funny, weird, because like we try to find weird, funny, unusual facts.
Yeah.
It is stated in multiple places how much Ed loves milk.
Milk. Big bones.
Just he fucking, like, I put in my little notes here, he loves milk enough that it's a fact about him. like
could you, that says, like, you have to drink a lot of milk.
Yeah, you have to
do that.
Like, to be like a part of your, like, personality is he loves milk.
That's kind of fucking amazing,
to
be fully honest.
I thought that was really funny, but yeah, Holly said earlier, like, you know, if you haven't already seen Mindhunters, I've watched both seasons. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I'm gonna finish it up here soon and watch it. So
the actor who played Ed Kemper in the show did fantastic.
Phenomenal. It looks like you're looking in a mirror.
Yeah.
The people they picked for this movie is uncanny.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Uncanny. Makes me in a film stance.
Big nut.
Big Bert.
But yeah, it's Big Head is a good boy. Yeah, I think that is all I have left for Ed Kemper.
Yeah. Interesting guy, definitely
pretty evil.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely an evil man. As smart as he is, I think that's what makes him scarier. Is he's so fucking smart.
Yeah.
He's like, I feel stupid when I'm talking about Ed, because I'm like, damn, smarter than me.
I definitely think too, like I said earlier, I don't know if Ed Kemper would be still in pop culture if it wasn't for some of the brutal things he did. On top of being so helpful, like, it's such a weird...
It's really weird. I think because of his crimes being so heinous and so fucked. Like, I know we make jokes.
Yeah.
They're all tasteless jokes. That's why we are different than any other true crime podcast.
We'll make the tasteless jokes.
We'll make the tasteless jokes. I ain't afraid to say it.
Yeah.
He's a BF. I don't remember. I have to pull it up. But, no, like, I genuinely think... I think he's so prevalent in such an idea is because of what... Mostly, I think, because what he did to his mom. Yeah. I think it was, like, the first person that was like, mommy issues alert. I think 100% it was first, like, oh, look at this guy with mommy issues. Because, you know, like, we all, like, are like, oh, mommy issues, daddy issues. I don't think that really was a thing until then, especially because what he did to his mom's skull.
Yeah.
Skull fucking his mom was,
really,
I think, the peak of, especially in the 70s, where everyone put their mom on the pedestal because you respect your parents.
Yeah.
And especially someone who gave birth to you. I think that's what makes him so prevalent is because I think besides being the co-ed killer, if he didn't do what it did to his mom and her friend, I don't think he would have been as big in the news or as big, like we would be talking about like right now.
Yeah.
Like he wouldn't be like the Golden State or John McGeesey. I think having mommy issues, what kind of puts him apart just a bit more.
Really drove the nail into the
coffin.
Skull.
And then the skull.
Into the skull.
Really nailed that skull, you know what I mean?
Open up the pit. So, I will apologize that we were supposed to do this last week, but I opted into just canceling it for whatever reason and pushing it to this week.
I also cleaned my house because of it, so
hey,
win some, you lose some.
Yeah, win some, you lose some. So, this was a makeup week, so normally our next one would be next week as well, which is that going to be
That's fine.
good with you?
I've already have half my information done for the BTK. I was going to say RSPC, and then I was like, respect?
Yeah, what does it mean to me? I don't know.
I don't know what that means to me. But yeah, the BTK killer, butcher, torture, kill.
Which, another Mindhunter person.
Yeah.
We're not trying to chase after the Mindhunter people, but they happen to talk about. Yeah.
It's relevant.
And it's around the same exact time as Ed. Ed would have been in prison. If I remember right, and if I have my timeline right, Ed was in prison getting interviews while BTK was out murdering.
Yeah, it seems about right.
So, look forward to that one. We'll be back next Saturday, which is... hold on while I look at my calendar.
The 26th.
The 26th.
For BTK.
Around that same 3:30, 4 o'clock Mountain Standard Time time frame. And we'll be talking about BTK and what's next from us after that.
Yeah.
So
follow us on social media.
Yep, truecrimedrunks.com. If you want to get involved helping us, truecrimedrunks@gmail.com. Social media, top shelfers everywhere for everything else. And then
my if you like horror and books, Books Coffee Bees. One day I'll actually remember my own.
Books Coffee Bees.
Books Coffee Bees. I do a lot of vinyls and a lot of fun little knickknacks.
Lots of knickknacks. And then for those of you who love watching all the other top shelfer stuff, Read Between the Lines will be live here probably within the next 30 minutes.
Yep, I just texted the girls. They'll be on their way.
They'll be on their way. We'll be talking about the virgin suicide. So if you want to hang out, go grab a coffee, get hydrated. We'll be talking about a pretty dark book.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked. Didn't realize.
Pretty fucked book. So
it's a little fucky.
Thank you guys for everyone watching, and have a good rest of your day.
See you later.
Bye.
Alligator. Ooh,